Hello, my friends. This is Dr. Deepak Chopra, continuing our conversations with luminaries in every field of science, philosophy, spirituality, health, well-being, the future of humanity, and more. Today, I have the distinct pleasure of welcoming a friend who's I've known for several decades. I think he's the authority right now in the world on anything and everything to do with food as medicine. And I have in my hand his latest book, which I'm reading and enjoying very much. It's called The Pegan Diet, and basically 21 practical principles for reclaiming your health in a nutritionally confusing world. So, actually, first of all, thanks for joining me, Mark.
Oh my God, good to see you, Deepak. You're looking healthier than ever. I'm trying to see you. You look 10 years younger. I don't know. Whatever you're eating, I want to eat.
I made a commitment to myself that I'm going to keep reversing my age till I disappear into an orgasm.
Until you end up back in the womb, I guess.
So I'm on that way. I don't know where I'm going, but I'm on the way.
I'm on the same road to nowhere as you. I don't know where that is going.
So this is an extraordinary book. I think it has many, many, many implications for the well-being of ourselves, body, mind, and spirit, but actually the well-being of the planet. And it's very keen to talk to you about many of the things you bring up right in the introduction. So first of all, you give a little history of how you came up with this title. But,
Well, Deepak, you've been in this field for so long, and you know that there's so many diet wars out there. I mean, it's almost as divisive as politics and religion. And there's the keto people, and the paleo people, vegan people, and the low fat, and the low carb, and the high carb, and the low carb. I mean, it makes people crazy, and people are just confused and fed up, and don't know what to do, and don't know who to listen to. And I actually was sitting on a panel with a couple of friends of mine. One was a vegan cardiologist, one was a paleo doctor, and they were fighting. And I was back and forth in the middle. And I'm like, well, if you're paleo and you're vegan, I must be Pegan. And everybody laughed. It was just a joke. I just wanted to like lighten the mood. And then I went home and thought about it. And I'm like, wait a minute, they're identical. If you look at all the principles, they're identical except for one thing, where you get your protein, animals or grains and beans. They both think we should get rid of all processed food and sugar and starch and antibiotics and hormones and GMO and pesticides and all the junk that's in our diet. They both think we should eat a plant-rich diet, lots of plants and vegetables, fruits and vegetables. They both think the good fats are good, nuts and seeds and whole foods. They both think that we should be eating a diet that is got lots of good, colorful plant foods in it. And it's pretty similar. They even both think we should not be eating dairy. The only difference is where you get protein. So they have far more in common with each other than the standard American diet called the SAD diet. And that's really why I wrote the book, because I wanted to get away from all the diet wars. I wanted people to understand what are the basic principles of nutrition that science has right now that we can all agree on. And the agreements are far more than the disagreements. And we all agree we should be not eating the 60% of our diet is ultra processed food, which is coming from three crops, basically corn, wheat, and soy, that kills 11 million people a year, that makes 88% of Americans metabolically unhealthy and more susceptible to COVID and more susceptible to dying from COVID. So we got to kind of just get to the basics of what are the principles of eating in a way that promote and create health. And that's really the idea of food as medicine and the idea of personalization.
so I know you have 21 practical principles for reclaiming your health and nutritionally confusing well. And I did read most of these principles, and I just want the audience to just know what they are. So I'm going to just read them out from your book if you don't mind. Principle
Yeah.
one, use food as your pharmacy. Principle two, eat the rainbow with seven colors with all the phytochemicals. Principle number three, follow the 75% rule. What's the 75% rule?
It means if you're looking at your plate, 75% should be colorful plant foods,
Okay.
vegetables. We used to eat 800 species of plants, Deepak, as hunters and gatherers, that have all these rich phytochemicals, and we've lost our ancient nutritional wisdom by eating mostly a mono diet. I mean, animals do that. They have this inherent nutritional wisdom, and in grass-fed animals, they might forage on 100 different plants, and they'll eat this plant because it has this particular phytochemical medicine or it has this particular nutrient, and they'll move to another plant, and they know how to heal themselves organically through seeking out foods that heal them. We don't do that as humans. We've lost that nutritional wisdom, and our taste buds and our brain chemistry and our hormones have all been hijacked by the industrial food system, and this is a way to reclaim them and get it back.
As you know that, I'm a proponent of Ayurveda, where we say each seven colors of the rainbow is right. Sweets are salt, bitter, and astringent. At least we don't need high glycemic foods like complex um, biodiversity in plants. Sweet aftertaste, not sweet when you're tasting it, there is slightly sweet aftertaste, which comes from complex carbohydrates. The only exception, by the way, is Ayurveda, which I think goes back to ancient times. When I grew up in India, milk and milk products, cheese, paneer, uh, all kinds of things were very important in our diet. And of course, in ancient India, the cows were treated with love. They were worshipped. Krishna played the flute to them because they were milked, and they were the source of sustenance, babies, and nutrition. So, what do you have to say of that? Is milk inherently bad, or is it because of the way the cows are treated, or is it because now we get even our dairy products from factories?
Yeah, this is a great example of one of the key principles of the book, which is the quality of what you eat matters. So the food that may look the same, like a glass of milk from a feedlot cow, may look the same as a glass of milk from an heirloom cow that's foraging on hundreds of species of wild plants, that's rich in phytochemicals, that has totally different fat profile, totally different nutrient levels, has a different form of casein, which is the protein in dairy that can often cause inflammation and gut issues. So milk is not milk is not milk. So the Brahman cows that you were having are these heirloom cows. They have A2 casein, which is not what we have in our modern Holstein dairy cows. And that A2 casein is far better tolerated, less inflammatory, doesn't cause all the same issues. Plus, the cows were eating a lot of things that our cows aren't eating. There weren't pumped full of hormones and antibiotics. They weren't milked while they're pregnant. Even organic cows here are milked while they're pregnant. So milk is not milk is not milk. Meat is not meat is not meat. Wheat is not wheat is not wheat. And I think that's the principle of the book. So everything that you're eating, you should try to understand how it is medicine, and is it good medicine or bad medicine. So I'm not against any food in particular. And for example, sheep and goat have more preference for A2 casein in the milk, which is better tolerated by people. So that's an option. So I'm not against anything. It's just choosing what, right?
What is it? Okay. Right, beans, blueberries, nuts, and fruits are these best sources of protein?
Well, I think, grains and beans and nuts and seeds are good sources of protein. Plant proteins, you have to eat a lot more, particularly as you age. We chatted a little before, you're trying to grow a new body at 74 and reverse your biological age. But as you age, the studies show that we need more protein for muscle synthesis, and we need certain amino acids that are lower in plants. So you either have to really jack up your plant protein content and eat 2 or 3, 4 times more protein, or you have to supplement with amino acids, or you have to get your amino acids from animal protein, which is actually much more able to create muscle synthesis. And so I think in terms of, grains, grains are a great example. And I just sort of give an example that it sort of speaks to, again, what you're eating. If you eat our modern wheat, it's very different than the ancient wheat or the einkorn wheat, but it's also very different than other grains. So if you're eating modern American wheat, it's hybridized, so it's got a lot of good properties for growing a lot of wheat in a robust condition that droughts, but it also contains a super starch. So it's worse for your blood sugar than table sugar. It's called amylopectin A. It's bred with other plants of wheat strains, and it has way more gluten proteins that are more inflammatory, which is why we're seeing all the gluten issues. And it's often sprayed at harvest with glyphosate, which is a herbicide that has harmful human effects in terms of cancer and the microbiome. And lastly, it's preserved with a preservative called calcium propionate that is inducing autism in animal models and causes behavioral issues in kids. Now, that is a very different flour, if you're going to make pancakes, than the pancake recipe I have in the book, which is actually chai pancakes. You might like it. It's chai. They're really good. They're like Indian chai pancakes made with buckwheat flour. Now, there's many kinds of buckwheat. They're not all the same. And there's been a recent rediscovery of an ancient grain called Himalayan Tartary buckwheat, which is now being grown in the United States in upstate New York. The first crops are being grown. And it's an ancient grain that was raised in the Himalayas under really rough conditions, which makes the plant more robust. So it produces a lot of defense mechanisms to fight against all the struggle it has to grow, which are called phytochemicals. These are plant compounds. There are 25,000 of these in our food. The Rockefeller Foundation is now funding hundreds of millions of dollars to create the periodic table of the phytochemicals. And the phytochemicals in Himalayan tartary buckwheat, there's 132 of them. Some of them found nowhere else in nature. They're incredibly immune rejuvenating. They help to kill the zombie cells that make us age. So if you're trying to reverse your age, Deepak, you want to get some of this flour and make your Himalayan chai pancakes, because the actually kill the zombie cells, which are basically damaged immune cells running around our blood that age us. And it's got higher amounts of protein. It's very low glycemic. So if you're making your pancakes from that, or you're making them from white flour that's dwarf wheat, very different. And so you can eat anything as long as you understand that the quality of the information in the food determines the quality of your health. That's the game changer.
I'm speaking to Dr. Mark Hyman, one of the pioneers of the pioneer, in fact, the author of this amazing book, The Feeding That. And he's a veritable encyclopedia on nutrition and life in general. I'll just read some of the other chapter headings, and then I want to. There are.
Hey, Deepak, your audio is a little low. I don't know if it's low on your side, but I don't know if your
Very good.
speaker.
Don't worry, we have everything here. If you can-
Okay, I can hear you, but I just didn't want sure it's recording well on your side.
No, we're good.
Okay. Okay.
So let me read some of the other headlines. Five each the picky about poultry as we say. 7 have fat, very new. 8 we discussed about dairy. Eat like a vegetarian. I'm going to come back to that in a moment, because I think that's very important. Eat sugar like a recreational drug. As always, do rely on coffee, don't rely on coffee and alcohol. Although recently, by the way, I've been reading this stuff about coffee being preventive and things like Alzheimer's and various GI cancers. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think coffee is a mixed bag, right? It's the number one source of antioxidants in our diet, but that's only because our diet is so poor. And it does have phenolic compounds. It can be beneficial. I think it depends on the person. Some people are good caffeine metabolizers and others aren't. And if you're not a good caffeine metabolizer, you're going to feel wired and anxious. It's going to affect your sleep. It's going to cause anxiety, and it creates stress hormones in the body. So for some people, it's great and well tolerated, and others not. And I think you have to pay attention to what your body's telling you.
Well, 13 cleanse, detox, and reset wisely. 15 assess the risks and benefits of a vegan diet. 15 eat for gut health. I'll come back to that as well. 16 eat for longevity. I'll come back to that. 17 eat the certain nutritional society earlier. So of all these things right now, I want to focus first on a couple of things that are very important. Which you talk a lot about in this book. I've been focusing on this a little bit in my own research. Let's inform our guests about the microbiome and why it's so important to address the microbiome and how we can change the genetic information in our body, not only the genes themselves by changing our diet, the microbial genes, but also upgrade the activity of the human genes. Talk to me about the microbiome.
Yeah, this is one of the most exciting frontiers in medicine. And who knew it would start with poop? I mean, we just thought it was a waste product.
In my view, poop is recycled stardust, the basis of life on this planet.
It's true. And actually from Ayurveda, if you read some of the ancient Ayurvedic texts, they always talk about how health starts in the gut.
Yeah.
And in traditional medicine, we just didn't learn any of that. And in functional medicine, we've been focused on this for over 30 years of treating the system by treating the gut. And now with the microbiome research, we're learning so much about it. For example, the microbiome has more cells than your own body, maybe anywhere from 10 times as, or 5 to 10 times as many cells as your own body. It has about 100 times as much DNA. So you've got 20,000 genes. Well, you might have 3 million microbial genes. And what are those genes doing? Well, they're making proteins, and those proteins are getting absorbed, and they're becoming metabolites in your own blood. So if you take a blood sample of a human being, because when you go to the doctor, you get like 30 analytes, your chemistry, it's like a few things. But there's literally thousands of things running around in your blood. And it turns out that maybe a third or up to a half of them come from the microbiome. And if you've got an ecosystem in your gut that's unhealthy, it's going to create bad molecules that make you sick. It's going to affect your mood. It's going to cause heart disease. It's going to cause cancer, autoimmune diseases, autism. I mean, it's really striking. I mean, they literally transplanted poop from a healthy kid to an autistic kid and reverse autism. And if that happens, what are the implications of that in our microbiome? And the thing we do every single day, more than anything else that influences our microbiome, is eating. And every bite of food has information that feeds the good guys or the bad guys. And I think we're talking about mood and mental health before, but it turns out that there's a huge role, and Uma Nadu's done a lot of work on this from Harvard, looking at how the microbiome plays a role in our brain, our mood. And I discovered this years ago as a functional medicine doctor. I call myself the accidental psychiatrist because I was treating people's physical issues, and their depression would go away, their anxiety would get better, their memory would improve, their ADD would improve, their bipolar disease would get better. I'm like, what's going on here? Like, how is this happening? And often it was really by fixing the microbiome. And so there's a great example, for example, if you look at a particular bacteria that is really important in our gut called Akkermansia muciniphila. This bacteria creates a coating on the lining of the gut, and it prevents a leaky gut, which makes the barrier, like your skin, so nothing can get in. And if your barrier is broken, like if you've got a cut, then the bacteria and the food gets in, and your immune system starts to react, and you get all this inflammatory diseases. Turns out this bacteria is really important, and a lot of people don't have enough of it. And if you have low levels of it, you're at high risk for cancer, heart disease, autoimmune disease, metabolic issues. And it turns out one of the most exciting advances in cancer therapy is immunotherapy. These are called checkpoint inhibitors. And they basically help your own immune system to fight the cancer. And you can have a stage 4 cancer, like Jimmy Carter had melanoma. He's cured, he's still going, and he's almost 100 years old now. He had a terrible terminal cancer that was cured by these drugs. But if you don't have enough of this bacteria in your gut, that cancer drugs won't work. But guess what? They love to eat pomegranates and cranberries and green tea. So it turns out these polyphenols, these plant chemicals that we don't get enough of, are literally the fuel to grow the good guys. So yes, we need prebiotics and probiotics, but we also need these polyphenols that come from the rainbow color vegetables, the 7 colors, flavors, or tastes. All those things are important. And flavor, by the way, with Ayurveda, flavor is so interesting because flavor connects to the nutritional quality of the food. So you're talking about bitter, for example. The alkaloids that make something bitter actually have beneficial properties for your health. So every one of these flavors, and that's really how these animals seek out these plants with different flavors. They're not thinking, oh, I'm going to get my phytochemical here from this plant. And they're like, oh, this tastes good, and this tastes good. And that's we've lost our ability to sense what we need because our whole diet has become so monotonous and so processed that our brain chemistry and our hormones can't authentically regulate what we want. Animals know what to eat, and even sometimes kids will know what to eat if you don't get them hooked on junk. We've just lost it, and so we're in this vicious cycle of eating all these foods that are harming us and not seeking out those foods that help us.
Recently I've been talking to Rudy Chansey at Harvard. I wrote 3 books with him. And he informs me that less than 5% of disease-related mutations are fully penetrating. So somebody has a BRCA gene like Angelina Jolie had, that guarantees.
Yeah.
So for that, you should have CRISPR, etc. The remaining 95% or more of chronic illness is lifestyle related, including stress, sleep, and all that. But of that, a major proportion is due to dysbiosis. And we now know that 30% of the microbiome has actually disappeared due to industrial food production in most urban areas. Is that true?
Yes, I mean, 70% of all crops are sprayed with glyphosate. It's on everything, and glyphosate is a microbiome destroyer. If humans eat it, if it's on the soil, it kills the microbiology of the soil. So it definitely is a huge problem. And I think we've, if you look, I wanted to write a book called Paleo Poop, which is, hunter gatherers and poop and what that looks like and how do we get more of it? Because I think they didn't have all these age-related diseases. They didn't have all these chronic illnesses. And they were able to regulate their immune systems in a different way by eating foods that were of huge varieties that fertilized all the good bugs and didn't grow the bad bugs. We basically have weeds in our garden we need to get rid of.
So here's something that I found out recently. I didn't know that. We've been talking about the microbiome and the human gut, mostly because it affects health and well-being. But recently I started speaking to both some Ayurvedic doctors and also to photobiologists from India. And the reason I started speaking to the Ayurvedic doctors is that in Ayurveda there's a concept called virya, the potency of food as medicine, but also the potency of Ayurvedic herbs. And what this Ayurvedic doctor told me, number one, that the potency, the virya of Ayurvedic herbs, which are known, to be adaptogens and anti-inflammatory and many other properties,
Yeah.
potency has gone down because of industrial contamination of the soil. So even
Yes.
the herbs are not working as well as they used to. And so while I was talking to him, I also came across this Indian photobiologist who's an expert on the planetary microbiome, not just the human microbiome. What he told me, and I corroborated this after talking to other people, is if you go under the soil, let's say in the Amazon and or any rainforest, under the soil, not the soil itself, if you go a little bit deeper, 1 teaspoon of soil, according to these guys, has more genetic biodiversity than the entire surface of the planet, including the rainforest. So the genetic information of the planet is underneath the
Yeah.
earth in these rainforests. And what I was thinking, along with this guy, and hopefully with your help, we can actually create a project where we are calling this project Rewilding and Resurrecting the Planetary Microbiome, not just the human microbiome, because this planetary microbiome has the genetic information of all species, not just humans, but even species that now we don't see that many on our planet because of urbanization. And if we resurrect the planetary microbiome, we can bring back other species, but also we'll have new sources of protein. Because right now the animal protein is just fine, like chicken, poultry, lamb, beef, fish. So you go under the soil and you have this amazing genetic
Yeah.
information for trillions of proteins, not just two, trillions. And my question to you is, because you mentioned here in this book, the implications of climate change, that this could be the most important factor in reversing climate change, could be just resurrecting the genetic information of our planet right underneath the soil, which gives rise to all of life, not just you and me, but all of
You're
life,
right.
which is directly connected to the biosphere and the health of the biosphere. And this would be a very practical way to tackle climate change and reverse it.
100%. I mean, this is one of the most important discoveries is that the soil has been so damaged that the nutritional density of our food has declined so much that it's affected the quality of our health. And that the way we farm and the way we grow food has literally damaged the entire microbiome of the soil. So not only do we need the microbiome of the soil to put the nutrients in the plant, because that's how the plants get the nutrients, but the microbiome of the soil holds carbon because it's life. Carbon is life. So the carbon dioxide from the air gets sucked through the plant, gets put into the roots. It feeds all the microbial life in the soil. It creates this beautiful ecosystem that then extracts all the nutrients that the plants can get. So the nutritional density, like you're saying with those herbs from Ayurveda, they're crappy compared to how they used to be a few hundred years ago because the soil is a problem. And then we've lost the organic matter in the soil. We've basically put a third of all the soil that we have has been lost in erosion and has released all that carbon in the atmosphere. And 1/3 of all the carbon today in the atmosphere that's causing climate change, which is 1 trillion tons, 1/3 of that, about 300 billion tons, comes from the soil erosion. So we have a soil crisis, which leads to a food crisis, which leads to a climate crisis, which leads to a health crisis. Because we are missing this kind of sense of ecological interconnection in our own ecological beings. We are biological ecosystems, are dependent on ecosystems of nature, and we become so divorced from that that we think we're eating healthy food because it's grown. Let's say it's corn or a soybean, or maybe it's like even broccoli. But if the soil is crappy, the food isn't as nutritionally dense, and we're not getting the benefits from it. And we know this is true. We know compared to 50 years ago, if you eat broccoli or even the best vegetables, it's not as good as they are today. It's not as, I mean, they're not as good as today as they used to be.
While we're talking about harnessing fossil free energy and looking at transport systems that don't use fossil fuels, while we're doing all that, harnessing energy from sources other than, say, fossil fuels or petroleum products, we're not really addressing the major contributor to climate change, which, if we address, is reversible.
That's right. In fact, the good news, Deepak, you'll be happy to hear, is that this week we're doing a hearing on the new House Agriculture Committee with David Scott, who's a congressman from Georgia, on regenerative agriculture and how do we start to incentivize and create policies and motivate farmers and transition from conventional agriculture. This is now a conversation that's happening in Washington. I had the privilege of talking to John Kerry, who's the head of climate change for Biden administration, and they are understanding these are all interconnected issues. So I'm very hopeful to see the beginning of these conversations start to happen.
So Mark, as our foundation embarks with many people across the world on what we're calling rewilding the cities with the planetary microbiome and growing fruits, vegetables, herbs, and trees using the new planetary microbiome, I'm going to come to you for help because this could be the best way to practically address climate change. Also, we need a spiritual shift in that we don't call this the environment. This is our extended body. Those rivers are oceans are our circulation. The earth is recycling as our body. The air is our breath. And the stars manufacture the atoms in different galaxies that are now recycling as your body. Why do we call it the environment? It's our body.
You're right. And I mean, it's so true.
It's our body, isn't it?
Yeah,
and
yes.
We can't live without our universal body either, right?
No, it's so true. You always talk about the interconnection of all things and how, an atom from Jesus might be in us and so forth. But, you're hitting on a point which is not just a theoretical concept. It's an actual concept. We are ecological beings that are part of a larger ecosystem. And one of the beautiful things about, for example, plants is that they know what to do in our body. And how did that happen? I think we've co-evolved with the phytochemicals in plants and basically hijacked their chemicals to run our biology. I call this symbiotic phytoadaptation, meaning we've grown in symbiosis with these plants and evolved with them. So, for example, we don't need to make vitamin C because we get it from our food. But on the other hand, we can't make glucosinolates, also sulforaphane, from broccoli, which helps upregulate glutathione and detoxifies chemicals. We can't make the anti-inflammatory molecules that are found in turmeric that are in Indian food, but we use those to help create health. And in every example, or whether it's the pomegranate that feeds this is a fascinating discovery. If you have the right microbiome in your gut, you can take the pomegranate and convert a molecule in the pomegranate to this compound called urolithin A that enhances muscle synthesis, that actually causes mitophagy, that basically recycles all the bad mitochondria. And how does the body know how to do that? It's because we've grown up in intersection and interconnection with everything. And to think that we are these humans that have nothing to do with nature is just becoming this artifact of industrialization that's causing our demise. And until we get back into understanding that there is no difference between our microbiome and our biology and our ecosystem and the planetary microbiome and the planetary ecosystem, we're screwed. So we have to do that. And I know you've been beating this drum for 50 years now.
I know, Mark, on classic mechanistic Darwinian evolution. It's the evolution of ecosystems all at once that is happening since the beginning of time. It's the evolution of ecosystems as a whole systems biology process rather than natural selection and random mutations. I think we're going to see a revolution even in our understanding of evolution as a result of this kind of work.
Absolutely. I mean, the whole regenerative agriculture movement is, one of the things that's not being talked about is that regenerating the planetary ecosystem and regenerating soil and regenerating, pollinators and regenerating water systems, and it is also regenerating human health. That our health depends on the health of our planetary ecosystem and of the soil and of our water and all of it. And if we don't get that, we're kind of screwed. And that's really the reason I wrote this book, was to say, look, how do we understand how to eat in a way that regenerates human health and planetary health? How do we eat in a way to become a regenitarian, which, no one can be against that. People can say, I don't want to be vegan, I don't want to be paleo, whatever. No one's against regeneration, right? Let's regenerate human health, regenerate the planet, regenerate life. Nobody can be against that. So I think that's a good thing.
Talking about Hyman, the author of this extraordinary book, The Season Life, he's a medical encyclopedia on nutrition and well-being in life. I highly recommend this book. Please read it. Before we end, Mark, I could talk to you forever, but
please, anytime.
just want to talk about one more subject. Principles of food for longevity. Just let's address the one thing that you talked about there. The one thing, that one thing you say is insulin resistance that causes premature aging. So can we talk about that before I let you go?
Absolutely. So, we think of all age-related diseases as different, right? You have heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, high blood pressure, kidney failure. And we treat these all, and you were a doctor, you were trained as a physician, we treat these all in silos with different specialists, and we think they're all different. But it turns out underneath, there's common mechanisms that drive everything. And inflammation is connected to all these things. But underneath the inflammation is this process we call insulin resistance, which means that if you eat sugar or starch, your body is almost intolerant of it. And in order to get the fuel into your cells, your body has to produce more and more and more insulin to keep your blood sugar in balance. And this drives a whole cascade of harm throughout the body. One makes you store belly fat or organ fat, which is, it's not just holding up your pants, it's a powerful metabolic organ that produces cytokines, inflammation, or the cytokine storm. Why are people who are obese 3 times more likely to end up in the ICU or die? Because their fat cells are just basically on fire, and you add a little virus to that, and it's like a gasoline on a fire. So we really have to understand that this stores the fat cells. It makes us hungry. It slows our metabolism. It causes our brain chemistry to get into cycles of depression. It's linked to Alzheimer's, cancer, heart disease. In fact, we know that many of the cancers that we see commonly, colon, breast, prostate, pancreatic cancer, these cancers are caused by insulin resistance. So is heart disease. 2/3 of all people with heart attacks, it's because of insulin resistance. Alzheimer's, they're calling type 3 diabetes. Kidney failure, mostly is because of high blood pressure or because of diabetes, and those are caused by insulin resistance. So it's a fundamental problem. And why do we have this? Well, it was a good thing to produce lots of insulin to store a lot of fat when there wasn't much to eat. And all you had to do, like you watch the bears in Alaska, the grizzly bears, they binge on salmon. They don't gain a lot of weight at the beginning of the summer. At the end of the summer, they go up in the mountains and they eat all the berries, and they'll gain 500 pounds by eating sugar, right? And that's a good thing, because then they go hibernate. The problem is we just keep eating all winter, and we have now 1 out of 2 Americans has diabetes or prediabetes. 88% of us are in poor metabolic health, which is essentially insulin resistance. And so this single thing is because we eat about a pound of flour and sugar a day per person. We should not be eating that amount of flour and sugar. That's why I say treat sugar like a recreational drug. It's not that you can't have it, but it shouldn't be breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you shouldn't be eating a half a pound of it a day, which is about what Americans do. So we're really in this moment where so many of our global crises are because we're producing massive amounts of these sugary, starchy calories. We're putting in all this processed food. We're feeding it to the global population. We're getting worse metabolic health, and then we're going to be more susceptible to these pandemics like COVID. I mean, why are the death rates per million in Vietnam or in China so much lower? It's not just because of the political handling of the crisis. It's because they might have 1% obesity in Vietnam. We have 42% obesity. That's the problem. And so if you can do one thing for your health and longevity is to really eat a low starch and sugar diet. And I think, I was walking with Leonard Guarte, who's, the guy who discovered sirtuins from MIT, which are the master regulators of aging. And I'm like, so what's the secret? Like, how do they work? And what controls them? Why do they get all screwed up? He says, it's sugar. It's sugar. And I talked to Siddhartha Mukherjee, and he's like, Mark, we've got this great discovery about cancer and what's really causing cancer. I'm like, what? Is it sugar? He's like, how did you know? And I'm like, yeah, well, that's what the science have been saying for a long time. So that's one of the key principles, is eat a very low starch and sugar diet.
I've been speaking to Dr. Mark Hyman, who is looking at that, and we have 21 practical principles for reclaiming your health in a nutritionally convenient way. For me, this is a very important book that has many implications for health, longevity. I've been saying for a while, Mark, that the future of well-being is precise, personalized, predictable, preventable, participatory, and a process. You're a pioneer in this process.
That's right.
So now we can measure, we can look at the microbiome, we can individualize, personalized treatment, and much more. And all the secrets are right here in this book.
Thank you, Deepak. You're the
I
best.
hope we get to converse regularly, and I'll need your help in
I'm on board.
climate change. With your help, okay?
Absolutely, Deepak. Anything for you.
God bless. Thank you.
Blessings.
Yeah.
Okay.